We're going to talk about digital cameras tonight. I know a lot of you already have a digital camera, but I'm going to start out by talking about some of the basic considerations if you're thinking of upgrading or getting a new digital camera, and then we'll get into the business of once you have a camera, then what happens. So let's get started here. Basically, digital cameras come in two general formats. One is the point and shoot style camera, and the other is the single lens reflex digital camera. And these are similar in some ways to the film cameras. The single lens reflex digital cameras are probably the most useful for high-end users. For the average user, you may not want to spend all the money and carry all the weight. However, if you're doing sports photography where you need a really fast reaction, or you're doing wildlife photography and you want to have a selection of telephoto lenses to get up close and personal to that little chickadee or whatever you're taking pictures of, then you probably would consider a single lens reflex camera. Or if you were a kidnapper or one of the other people who goes around taking portraits of people. You know, the kidnappers are those people that set up a little booth in Kmart and they invite your kids to come in and take pictures for the grandparents or whatever. At least that's what they used to call those people. But if you're a professional portrait photographer, you're coming around to Bristol Village every other year to take pictures for our picture directory. Actually, the high-end point and shoot cameras will do anything you need to do above and beyond what you would need. However, you probably are going to invest in a single lens reflex camera just so that the people who are sitting for the portrait don't see this little thing you can put in your pocket for their sitting, and they'll be impressed by it. But otherwise, unless you're in one of those professional or semi-professional categories, the point and shoot cameras are completely adequate with today's technology. And there's a tremendous variety of point and shoot cameras to consider. And when you get off and talk to the, just as a preliminary mention, some of the remarks tonight, for those of you who don't want to take a lot of notes, are in the April newsletter. And if you've opened up your PDF file version of the newsletter, I hope you've noticed our new quick index, which allows you to click and jump right to an article, or you also should have an index on the side where you can jump between articles. In any case, a lot of the content of what I'm going to say tonight is also in that newsletter article. Oh, I just did that part. I want to click out there, not there. Okay, when you go to the camera store, if you happen to talk to a camera salesman, they might start yakking about how many megapixels the cameras have. This seems to be one of the big boasts nowadays in the digital camera business. And it's one of these situations that's great for marketing where they can say, hey, mine is bigger than yours. However, when you get to the practical part of it, well, first of all, the megapixels translate into how many pixels wide and high little dots of image that you have per picture. For example, if you have a 1 megapixel image, it's going to be 1,280 dots wide by 960 dots tall. On the other hand, if you have a 12 megapixel picture, it's going to generate an image that's 4,000 by 3,000 dots. What's messy is to try to figure out how this resolution translates into what's the biggest print you can make before it starts looking like the old comic strips when you look close at them, right? When you start seeing the individual dots. The numbers here in this table, which are reproduced in the April newsletter, by the way, are fairly conservative numbers. And if you only had 1 megapixel in your image, you could print a 5x7 print and it would look pretty good. It would be hard to see the little dots. If you had 2 megapixels, or as I might mention later, if you adjust the resolution factor within your larger megapixel camera to 1600 by 1200, that's very adequate for printing 8 by 10 pictures. And there aren't a lot of you that are probably printing much bigger than 8 by 10 pictures. By the way, for $100 now, you can get 16 and even 20 megapixel cameras. And that's really overkill, since with a 6 megapixel image, you can do bigger than a 20 by 30 print, and it'll still look pretty good. If you want to see what it looks like, next time you're in the computer room, just to the right of the copy machine, there's this big print, about 20 by 30, of the clematis that I took with a 6 megapixel camera and had it printed up at Sam's Club for, I don't know, 10 bucks or something like that for that size print. So if you really want to see what the image looks like with a 6 megapixel image, that's a place to view. Anything more than that, you can get 20 by 30 and more. Is there any time when you might want to have more megapixels, even though you're not going to make giant billboards or anything? And the answer is, well, yeah, because if you want to crop the pictures, and that is take a little bit of the picture and use that as your new picture, then there's a consideration. For example, in this image, let's say that this was 4,000 pixels wide, and I wanted to crop it with this little red box there and make that a new picture. Well, if this is 4,000 wide, half of that would be about 2,000, and a little more or a little less than half of that is probably about 1024. I can probably print this little piece of that big picture at 8 by 10 and still have it look pretty good. But if you plan to do a lot of cropping, maybe you take the whole family reunion, all 43 people in one picture, and you want one of those people, then you're going to get in and crop pretty tight, and in that case, you might want more megapixels to be able to get in close without ending up with a picture looking like little blocks in the thing. I see a couple of frowny foreheads, so ask me a question, please, if this is not clear yet. So basically, almost any camera you buy today on the market, any digital camera, is going to have all the pixels you're probably going to need. Because, like I say, for $100, you can easily get 12, 14, 16 megapixel cameras. The more megapixels, however, will give you more options for cropping if you're going to manipulate the pictures after the fact. Okay, so that's one of the sales features that they're going to throw at you if you're in the market for a camera. And basically, about any number of megapixels that's on the market right now is going to be enough. You don't have to spend a lot extra. It's actually possible for a price to buy cameras that have 50 megapixels. And as a matter of fact, Hasselblad of film camera fame now makes a digital camera with 50 megapixels. And who would need that? Maybe Ansel Adams, if he was around, might need that. But you or I, nah, we don't need that. We don't need even 46, which Sony and Canon are now coming out with 46 megapixel pictures. The downside of having a lot of megapixels is, hey, these things take room on your storage media. And if you find out, this is like an area function. If you multiply these two numbers together, you'll get a relative idea how much space it's going to take on your hard drive or on your little chip in the camera. And you notice that this doesn't go up in a linear fashion. A 12 megapixel image is not just twice as big as a 6 megapixel image. So if you overdo it on how many megapixels, you're going to be taking a lot more space. Let me back up to that frame again. Suppose that one of your primary applications of taking pictures is to email them to your cousin Frederica somewhere in Siberia or wherever. Well, the thing is, if you take a 12 megapixel picture and don't modify it at all and just ship it off to somebody by email, first of all, it's a big data file, and it's going to take a lot longer to email it. Second of all, the average computer user, when they open up their email, has a screen resolution probably not much more than 1024. So if you send them directly a 4,000 pixel wide picture, they're going to have to scroll back and forth on it to see the whole picture, and they're going to complain because you sent the whole family reunion album, and they were all those big files, and it was about 10 gigabytes of download or upload time. So if your purpose of taking the pictures is for email, there are some tricks you can use to reduce the size of it after you reduce the number of pixels or the resolution after you have it taken, but before you email it. Question. How do you do that? How do you change the size? That's a good question, and don't let me forget to answer that question a little later. Okay, when we get a little farther along, once we get the pictures into the computer. Okay, another factor that you're going to consider if you're looking at a camera is whether or not it has zoom lens capability. If you remember the old film cameras, the SLRs especially, there are all kinds of interchangeable lenses, zoom lenses that you could buy and put on them. The point and shoot cameras don't have, except one or two rare exceptions, don't have the ability to put interchangeable lenses in, but they do usually come with some zoom capability. And there are two kinds of zoom that they might advertise, either optical zoom or digital zoom. Forget about digital zoom. It's a meaningless number. What happens in the camera if you're using a digital zoom is the same as if you took that picture later and cropped a little piece of it. You're basically reducing the resolution of the image when you use a digital zoom. Why not take the full frame and do the equivalent of a zoom by cropping it after the fact? So digital zoom numbers are not worth talking about with still cameras. It might be a different story if you're talking about a camcorder, because there you're not going to have a still frame that you're going to manipulate, and it's going to be kind of moving and kind of fuzzy anyway, and so you might want to have a big zoom ratio on a video camera, but not a still camera. Now, yes, please.
You've demonstrated in the past with your Norway program that a point and shoot camera or a little camera can still take movies. And so how does does this argument affect that?
Most of the digital still cameras now, most of the point and shoot digital cameras nowadays can also do movies. And they can do movies of different resolutions depending on the camera. And if I really shouldn't use the word movie, because they're not movies, they're videos. They create a video data file. And when you're using videos, all of a sudden now we're talking about television technology more than computer technology, even though the technologies have converged between video on TV and video or displays in the computer world. There are different resolutions of movies, but there are a couple of standards. If you went shopping for a TV, you know that they might be advertising, wow, this one does 1080, and this one does 720, and all of that. So yes, you can do some movies with a point and shoot camera. However, if you're going to film an hour's worth of family reunion, you probably aren't going to use a point and shoot camera. You're probably going to go ahead and get a video camcorder. They aren't very big anymore, and they're not too expensive. So we'll worry about that part kind of as a separate issue if your application is making videos as opposed to making still pictures, okay? Now, when you forget about the digital zoom part and you look at the optical zoom, you might see something like this one does 3x, that one does 5x, what is that? That one does 10x. What does that mean? For those of you who remember the film camera days when you put a different lens on the camera, 35 millimeter film, a quote normal lens on a camera was about a little over 50 millimeters. And that's actually the diagonal dimension of a piece of 35 millimeter film. If you got a 100 millimeter telephoto lens on your old film camera, you would have a 2x telephoto. So a 5x telephoto in a digital camera is sort of equivalent, I say sort of, it's sort of equivalent to having what? A 250 millimeter zoom lens on your old film camera. If you had a 10x thing, wow, 500 millimeter telephoto lens, you could hardly afford one of those in the film camera days. Now, $150, you can have 10x zoom. There's some things to worry about, though, if you do too much zooming, because the magnification factor doesn't only magnify the picture you're looking at, but it magnifies all your shakes. So if you're going to use 10x zoom without a tripod, you're probably going to get fuzzy pictures. Now, most of those cameras, even the point and shoot pocket size ones that have a very decent or very large zoom capability will probably have something called digital image stabilization. The electronics in these things is just unbelievable. But it actually goes in and, with its microscopic little computer brain, tries to take out the shakes when you're taking the picture. And it does even more exotic stuff than that. But basically, if you're looking at shooting at stuff far away, like you want to take a picture of that chickadee without a big wildlife camera, you can do it, but you probably want to use a tripod for 10x zoom. Another question about the zoom. Let's go in the other direction and wide angle. You know, in the old film days, you could get a wide angle lens. Here's the consideration with the point and shoot cameras. If most of the things you're going to be taking are people in small rooms and you can't keep backing up to get more people in, you would like the wide angle capability. These millimeter equivalents that I have here, 28 or 22, that's the equivalent of what an old 35 millimeter wide angle lens camera would have. And all that means, basically what it means is the smaller the number on the wide side, the wider you can get, the smaller room you can stay in and still get everybody in the picture. So if you're going to be taking a lot of small rooms, then you want to look at not only the big zoom capability, but how wide it can go as well. And what those numbers mean are going to be hard to figure out. Best thing to do is to pick up a sample of the camera in the camera store and turn it on and estimate, well, let's see, I know my house, my living room is about that big, I wonder what it would look like. Just like when you're trying to buy a new TV and you don't know how big a flat screen TV to get, best thing to do before you go shopping is to measure, approximately step off, the distance from where you normally watch the TV from to the TV. Then when you go to the showroom and you have a wall full of all those things, stand that far away from it. Don't stand way back and say, oh wow, that bigger one is better, because you might get tennis neck if you buy a screen that's too big. You know, you're sitting too close, you go like this all the time trying to see everything. So in any case, if you actually can look at the camera rather than buying it blind, you can try out these things. Zoom wide as it can be, zoom close as it can be, and I'll show you how that zoom usually works on a typical camera here in just a bit. Another consideration when you're buying the camera is what kind of battery does it take? Is it a proprietary specialized battery that only works with that camera, or is it a generic battery? And if you're doing a lot of traveling and you're going to the wilds of Norway or something where they might not have a battery just like yours and your battery goes dead, it might be handy to be able to go to the closest 7-Eleven and pick up a couple of new AA's to get by. If you don't, if you have a camera like this one, and Len is now pointing for the camera 3.6 shot, and it's going to go up on the screen through the magic of video just like this. Whoops. Pretty soon it's going to go, yeah, that's it. This is the camera that I took on our Nordic trip, and it has a special Nikon battery in it. And so I was happily taking pictures through Finland, Sweden, Iceland before that, and when I got to Norway, I ran out of battery and I couldn't take pictures. And I couldn't just go down to the store and buy one of these things. So what about a battery charger? Well, the bad news is that if I would have brought a battery charger from here, it wouldn't have worked in the electricity they use in Norway. So actually in Trondheim, Norway, I found right there on one of the streets a camera store that sold Nikon equipment, and I was able to buy a European voltage and plug style battery charger for this guy and get him charged up. but it wasn't cheap. And the trouble is, now I can't use it anymore. But in any case, that's a consideration. Let's go back to the main screen. That's a consideration if you're traveling, is what kind of battery it might take. And if you want to have maximum flexibility, there are quite a few point-and-shoot cameras that do take AA batteries. And if you're buying batteries for your camera, lithium is better than alkaline. The research shows that a lithium battery will last a lot longer than the equivalent voltage alkaline battery. The other question is, do you want to have rechargeable batteries? And if you're using it a lot, even if it uses AA batteries, it's worth getting a set of rechargeable AA lithium and a charger. In the old days, one of my earlier digital cameras, it took AA's, and I had an extra set of those batteries, so I could get about 300 or 400 pictures on a set of batteries. And when I ran out, I put the others in. I put the originals in the charger, and I kept that going for years with just 2 sets of batteries. But if you're traveling, you may want to have an extra backup battery, or you might have the generic batteries. Ask me a question about batteries. Yes.
Yeah, Len, we're going to China in May, and I have.
Hold on for the microphone for a second, please.
Okay. We're going to China in May, and I have the type of battery that's proprietary. It's not a AA battery.
Yes.
But if I want to, I've got 2 of them for each of the cameras. I've got
Okay,
2
you have
cameras
2
on it.
batteries for the
two
same
batteries,
camera?
yes. So can I still charge this battery up using the thing that you attach to put in their outlets? You know, like I get the kind of.
I'm not sure what the electrical supply is in China. I should know this, but I don't. I don't know if they're using our 110 volts or if they do 220.
No, they're 220, and they're but
So I'm not
I
sure
have
about
a
that part.
transformer that I also will use
Oh,
with the.
That's supposed to work in China.
That's supposed to, yeah.
You should be okay. Also, have you noticed how many pictures you can take on one battery before you have to put your second one in or recharge it?
Quite a few, but I don't know exactly. No,
And how long are you going to be in China?
for 3 weeks,
For 3 weeks?
and I'll be using 2 cameras.
Okay, well, it took me about 2.5 weeks on my Nikon before I ran out of batteries. And how long the battery's going to last, unfortunately, is not a simple question, because if you only turn it on and do regular, what we used to call snapshots, it doesn't use the battery as much as if you do a lot of zooming in and out.
Okay.
And so the more you run the motors in there, the more juice you're using and the more you'll wear out the battery. There's a good chance that you could probably get in China a duplicate of the battery you have. What brand of camera is it?
It's a Nikon.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident that there will be especially in the big cities, there'll be a camera store that has them.
I've got 2 of them, so I could be charging up one while I
Yeah,
use
you should
the
be
other.
able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the hotel overnight, you should be able to charge it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be okay.
Okay.
If you're going to the wilds of Norwegian fjords, that might be a different story, but other questions
They're all made
about-
in China anyway, so.
Yeah, they're all made there anyway, and they're bound to be cheaper. Any other battery questions? Okay. Now, another feature on the camera that when you're looking at cameras you might be interested in is macro mode. And what does that mean? Well, macro mode is used for close-ups. So if you're going to be taking a lot of pictures, let's say of right in there close on Grandma Swanson's Christmas cactus, you might want to have a camera that has a macro mode so that you can get closer and closer to the thing you're taking a picture of. But for average point and shoot people, macro mode, unless you're documenting a mole to show to your dermatologist, macro mode is probably not very worthwhile. But I would worry about it if I'm going to do a lot of really good close-up photography, like flowers or insects or critters. Okay, now you've got your new camera. Now we have to figure out how to use it. So let's look at camera controls. Most all the cameras have some kind of knob with some adjustment on it. Sometimes they have these little grippers you can turn. Sometimes they stick up where you can get a hold of that thing. And there's almost all the cameras have some common settings on here, and I know some of you have brought your cameras, and take a look at the top of it and see if you can find a setting that says auto for automatic. This one down here in the lower right doesn't say automatic, but has this little green rectangle, and that's the automatic setting. I will confess to you that probably at least 95% of all the pictures I take, I use auto mode for. So unless you're doing some really fancy, unusual kind of pictures, set it on auto, go take pictures and be happy. You don't have to know all of these other things to take good pictures. By the way, somebody told me that cameras don't take pictures, people take pictures. And you can give the same camera to two different people and you get different kinds of pictures. But in any case, there are different settings on some of these. For example, this one here, it has a little lady's face there. That's a setting that they have adjusted internally, the things for typical portraits. There's another thing here, if you're going to take another setting on this one, if you're going to take pictures of volcanoes, well, scenery. Sort of looks like a volcano. I don't know what that symbol is, but scenery. There's a setting here that's a little posy. So that's the setting you would use for close-ups, like flowers. There's a setting here that's uninterpretable in this one, but it's right side up over here. If you use your imagination, this is supposed to be some athlete running. So if you're going to take pictures of things moving fast, you would use that setting. In the old days, when life was a lot more complicated, and believe me, it's a lot simpler with digital photography than it was with your old film cameras, you had to learn about the combination of f-stop and shutter speed that would let just the right amount of nice exposure. Well, it was also always a compromise between f-stop and shutter speed, because when you change the f-stop to make a smaller and smaller opening, the focus was sharper, the depth of field was greater. If you opened it up to let more light in, the depth of field was not as good. However, if you shut it way down, you weren't letting as much light in, so then you have to open the shutter for a longer period of time, because that combination always has to put the same amount of light out. Well, so if you're doing action photography, you would want to put it on a high shutter speed, but then you have to open the lens. You have to worry about that now. If you want to worry about it all, just put it on the little running guy when you're taking pictures of action stuff. And when you're taking pictures of mountains, put it on the volcano or the scene setting. But otherwise, like I say, 95% of all the pictures I take is just on automatic, and I find that completely adequate almost all the time. You notice that most of these cameras have a little setting here that looks like some kind of movie camera or video camera, and that these cameras have capabilities of making videos. And you would just click it over to that setting, and now you start recording, and until you stop recording. So there's a question coming up right here, right next to you.
Accidentally,
Go ahead.
my camera was on movie mode
Okay.
when some pictures that we wanted were taken. Now, how can I take a frame and make it a still?
Okay.
frame?
So the question is, suppose that you have some video footage and you just want one of those frames and make a printed picture out of it. The answer is yes, you can do that. But there's two issues about it. One is you have to transfer that file, that data file that has the movie clip, the video clip, into a computer. And then in the computer, you have to have a program that will capture a single frame, because that video clip is probably making 30 frames for every second that goes by. And because it's making that many frames, even though you might have a 16 megapixel camera, when you go into movie mode or video mode, it's not using the full 16 megapixels for every frame, or it would go crazy. I mean, just couldn't handle it time-wise or space-wise. So you're probably going to end up getting a 720 pixel wide still frame once you get into that. But you won't be able to do that easily. You'd have to get the movie file into a computer. And by the way, if you're only doing this once, we have computer software in the computer room in our multimedia workstation that allows us to do that. We can open up that file in a movie editor or in a video editor program, and we can capture that one frame, and then we can then save that as a separate digital file that we can put on a flash drive or make prints or whatever. So yes, it's possible to take frame by frame images out of a video, but they're not going to be as sharp and clear and as high resolution as the still frames in your camera. Okay? Next question. Okay, so those of you that have your cameras here, have you all looked at the top here, and do you have an automatic setting? If you can find that automatic setting, you're ready to go. And occasionally, there may be some of the other settings that might be nice to know about, but like I said, I get by 90+% of the time without any of the other settings, and if you've looked at some of my pictures, you can decide whether they're okay or not using the automatic setting. Here's a top view of Kent's brand new, or fairly new now, Nikon Coolpix S9300 camera. And you notice it's, I don't know if you probably can't see that from the back row. It says GPS right there. This particular camera has a GPS chip in it, and what that means is that every still image that you take with this camera it's a data file. In digital cameras, you're just creating digital data files, and that data file includes latitude and longitude information where the picture was taken. So you go traveling around the world and you take a lot of pictures and you get back home and say, I wonder where I took that picture. Okay, and you look at a data file and tell you. And then you probably go to Google Maps and find that spot. But that's a feature on the S9300. They make an S9200, which is the same camera without the GPS unit in it. And an increasing number of point-and-shoot cameras now have that capability to actually keep track of where each picture was taken. You notice that the little knob here, the adjustment knob, looks slightly different on Kent's camera than the early ones I showed. Let's look a little closer to that. There's an auto setting, and that's where we set it. There's only one of these that I'm really excited about, but I'll mention a couple of them. The effects thing, this particular camera, you can put a special effect and select it with a menu, and I don't know what it does. It may do vignettes, with fuzzy exteriors, soft focus. It may do a thing with the little star points. They have some special effects that you can add while you're shooting. Might do that just for fun. There's also something that I have not experimented with. Sounds bizarre. Smart portrait mode. The camera detects smiling faces and releases a shutter automatically when the people smile. Oh, you got to be kidding! We got to try that with Kent's camera. I've never experimented with that because I hardly ever take any pictures of people. I'm always taking butterflies or things like that. Which brings me to the continuous shooting mode option on this camera and on some other cameras. What this does is when you push the shutter release button, it takes a whole series of pictures, one right after the other. And if you're chasing George Hartwell's grandson swinging the bat at the baseball game in Arizona, where he was last week, you might want to use continuous mode, because then you get a whole series of pictures. You can pick the one where the ball was almost hitting the bat, which is kind of nice. Or if you're chasing wild butterflies around, like I do, you might do it. And here's a continuous sequence that I took, 6 pictures. The butterflies never sit still. And so then I can go through these different pictures, and I can find one where I liked the way the wings were pointed for composition, and I might not like all the extra weeds and trees back there. So once I've selected the image that I prefer out of the sequence, then I might fix it up and paint out the background and isolate just the butterfly. How did I do that, you might ask? I'm glad you asked that question, but I'm not going to answer it yet. So some of the cameras have these extra settings like the sequential thing. So if you're going to be doing, you have to think about what kind of pictures am I going to be taking. Am I going to be chasing moving things? Then you want to look for a camera that has that continuous frame thing. And by the way, does that add an awful lot of money to the camera? Well, what do you define as awful lot of money? You can get the one step below Kent's camera, the S9200 Nikon Coolpix, that does not have the GPS but has everything else the same, for $150 right now. And that has a 10x zoom lens. It has all kinds of capabilities, 16 megapixels, more than adequate. Okay, now you've taken your pictures. Now we get to the question, how do you get those pictures from the camera into the computer? Well, the chances are that your camera came with a USB cable. And so what you do is you plug the one end into your camera, the other end into the USB port on your computer. The chances are that your camera also came with a CD or a disk to install software into your computer that talks to that camera. I never do that. I did it once at the beginning, but I don't like to use the software. I haven't found any of the software that comes with the cameras that I liked yet. And I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes. But this is one way to do it, is just connect the camera right directly to the computer. The other way is you might have a computer that has one of these less than $20 extras, and it's a multiple card reader, right? Usually right on the front of the computer. And if yours doesn't have, we can install, for most mini tower cases, we can install one of these in the computer for, like I say, less than $20. And what you do with that is, to get the pictures into your computer, is you take the little card out, the memory card, out of your computer, and you plug it right into the appropriate slot. I'm sorry, you take it out of your camera and you plug it right into the appropriate slot. And as soon as you do that, the computer says, looks like another disk drive has just been added. And it'll wake up a little window. As a matter of fact, just for fun, let me just temporarily here. And let's shut everything down. Not shut it down, but make it small, so I'm on a regular Windows 7 screen. Now, back to the table, Daryl, if you're still awake. I know he's awake in there because he's our best operator. Takes a while for the projector to figure out where we're going. On this particular camera, if I turn it around here, on the bottom, there's a little place to open it up. I pop that open, and there's a place in there for the battery, and there's also a place for the little, in this case, SD card. So I just take that card out of the, I got my hand in the way. I can't get out of my own way. I just take that card out of the camera, and I take it off to my computer. Forget the camera now, because I'm going back to the computer, talking to Daryl. This particular computer, Louis the laptop, doesn't have one of those multiple card readers, but it does have a little slot here to put SD cards in. So I'm going to stick this into Louis. Poke. And Louis does the normal thing that your computer will do, the same thing as if you plugged a flash drive into your computer. It pops this little window up and says, gee, boss, what do you want to do? I found this thing. What do you want me to do with it? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, open a folder to view the files. And on this computer, Louis has a local disk drive C, DVD, which there's nobody home there. But now that I plugged in that SD card, it finds it and it treats it just like any other disk drive in the computer. Now, you've been around me long enough to know that I have my little soapbox lesson on you really need to learn how to use Windows Explorer to get control of your computer. And basically, this is a Windows Explorer window. And Windows Explorer allows me to explore all the different files in the computer. Once the computer, or once the camera memory card is in there, computer says, just another data file collection. But the SD card in this case has two folders in it. And one of the folders says NCFL. That's directory stuff that Nikon puts along with the pictures. But the other folder, which is common to all digital cameras and all phones that have cameras built in, is a folder called Digital Camera Images, DCIM. And if I open that folder in this Nikon, I have three folders now. Because in the Nikon, what they do is They create the camera does this. It creates a folder and it starts sticking pictures in the folder. And when that folder gets to be 200 pictures, the Nikon camera says, oh, this is getting crazy. I'm going to start a new folder. And so after 200 pictures, it creates folder number 101. And there's 200 more pictures. And when that one gets filled, it switches to a new folder, folder 102. And by the way, when I'm in the Windows Explorer, up here in this little corner, you can't read that, but if you hover on it on your computer, it'll say More Options. And I get several choices for how to display the files in the current folder. I can display them as a list with details, and that gives me a column heading that says date modified, name, date modified, type, how big it is. Or I can display them as a list, which is interesting but not real exciting. All it does is give me the file names for every one of the pictures. It's hard to know the difference between DSCN 1566.jpg and 1567. Those are the file names that the Nikon camera creates for each picture, and you'll notice they're in sequence. And it just does that, and the computer says, oh, I know his name, the name of that image. Or I can show them as medium icons, little tiny thumbnails, or I can show them as large icons. Usually that's adequate when you're looking for pictures, but there is a extra large icon size, and then you can scroll around all of your pictures, and in public everybody can see, what's all that? I was experimenting with macro mode this afternoon, and I took a bunch of pictures of the keyboard. But in any case, so how do I get the pictures into the camera? Well, if I use this approach, if I stick the card right into the computer and I open up that little window, I say view folder to look at files, then I'm in Windows Explorer. But they're all on the they're all in the DCIM folder in the Nikon camera still. What if I just wanted to take this picture and copy it to some other place on my hard drive? I can simply do right click, open up the context menu, say copy. I go over to my hard drive and I'll open up a list of all the folders in my hard drive, and maybe I'll click on this folder named XJunk. I'm going to right click on the folder named XJunk, and then I'm going to say paste. And if I show this as extra large icons, I have a copy of that image file or that picture now saved in a folder on my hard drive. The reason that I don't like to use the software that comes with the camera is because when you plug the camera in with a cord with that software in there, that software in Windows anyway, and I imagine it does the same on Gary's Mac, that software wakes up and says, oh, you want me to transfer the pictures? And you say, yeah, and you click on the transfer thing, and it puts them somewhere on your hard drive. And if you want to access those with anything other than that camera's software, it can be a bother to try to find them. So I like to have the control. I'm a control freak. So what I do is I go in here, and if I'm on my, not Louis, but the big machine, I'll create an archive. So I'll right click on the 100 Nikon folder, the whole folder. And then I say copy. Now I've copied every picture, all 200 pictures in one click. And then when I go over to my XJunk folder and say right click paste, it'll go clickety click, clickety click, click. Now it's, well, I made a mistake now. I got to wait for it to copy 200 pictures. But transferring 200 pictures is that complicated. Right click copy, go to the place you want them, right click paste. Now I know where those 200 pictures are living in my computer. They're in a hard drive in a file folder named junks. Yes?
One of the questions I've been facing and haven't solved is when I've got the camera with some video and some pictures, and how do I separate that out?
If I had on this camera or on this memory card is where they go. If I had some movie files, let me just cancel this transfer and let's go back and look at, I don't know if I have any movie files here or not. If I sort these by type, do I have anything other than JPEG pictures? No. If I did, it would have a name, but it wouldn't say JPG. It would probably say MOV, which is a movie file rather than a single picture file. But I can copy the movie file over to the hard drive the same as I can copy a single image file. Ask me another question. Okay, so back to the slideshow. Back here someplace. Run the slideshow, please. Back up a frame. Another frame. Oh, move pictures to the computer. Suppose I decided instead of trying to manipulate that little SD card, suppose I just plug this cable in to the camera on one side and into a USB port on the other side. Same thing's going to happen in Windows. It's going to go gugunk, make a little noise, and open up that same window. It says, hey, I found something. What do you want to do, boss? And you're going to click on the thing that says open folder to view files, and it's going to show that in Windows Explorer the same way it shows the SD card. So choose your poison. If you don't have a card reader built into your computer, then you can go ahead and plug the camera into a USB port and still use Windows Explorer. And I don't know what the name of the equivalent Explorer, File Explorer is on the Mac, but I know there's something there that's similar. iPhoto. So it'll find them that way. Oh, there's one other thing. When you handle this little SD card, what might happen, and this happened to me earlier today, which is why I put this slide in there. I took it back out of the camera, or out of the computer. Let me go back over here. I want to click on this little tiny thing down here that says safely remove. I better close up the directory so that I'm not looking at that folder anymore. I want to safely remove the removable memory. I want to eject the SD card. Safe to remove it. You don't want to just jerk that thing out of there, because if it happens to be it reading the files, when you jerk it out of there, you may trash its little memory and it'll lose track of where everybody is and it'll be a dead card. So you either have to turn the computer off before you remove the SD card, or flash drives, the same rule. Either turn it off first or you eject it first. So now I'm going to try to eject this and put it back in the camera, camera, this end up. It's only one way these things will go. Oh, what I was starting to say is when I was handling it like that, and then I put it back into the camera, don't hold it upside down, it won't work. And then I turned the camera on, I got a little message that popped up on the menu screen here. I'm going to see if this will actually show up on the video camera. I may or may not be able to show you this. No.
Please wait for the camera.
Yeah, I had it set to the wrong setting here. Okay, when I got to this message on that display, it popped up a nasty message here, and it says, I can't write on that SD card. SD card is locked. And I said, oh dear, what do I do now, coach? And I'll show you. Back to the slide. We're back to the slide. Got to get into that window. What? It's already. Yeah. If you look really close right in this area, there's a little plastic slider on that edge of the card, and that's a lock. And if you slide it one way, it locks the thing so that you cannot read or write. You can read, but you can't write on it. Okay? It's a write protect thing. And if you slide it the other way, it unlocks it. And what I found out is it's possible in the handling to accidentally lock it. And then when you put it in the camera, you say, how come I can't take any pictures? I broke it. No, I take it back out and slide that slider back down. So this is, if you remember the old floppy disk days, you'll remember that those 3.5-inch plastic discs had a similar lock that you could slide to protect it so you couldn't accidentally write stuff on them. Well, they preserved that technique on the SD cards. Ask me a question about moving pictures from the camera to the computer.
With your amount of time you have left, let's make sure we get Wanda's question in.
Oh yes, once they're in the computer, well, we went through Windows Explorer. Oh, here, go ahead.
Coming.
About the question about the the memory cards.
There's different kinds of cards, SD
Yes.
and SDHC and so on. You might talk about that because different cameras have different things.
The question is, there's more than one kind of SD card. First of all, they have different memory capacities. You can get them from 128 megabytes to 32 gigabytes in size. How big is enough? Well, in this particular camera, I've got a 16 gigabyte card, and as you saw on the list, I have almost 300 pictures on this memory card, and right now it's telling me that I can take 4,530 more pictures before I run out of space. So a 16 gigabyte card with 12 megapixel camera is more than enough to go to Norway and back. I took 1,200 some pictures and a few video segments and still had lots of room when I got home. So that's part of it. The other thing is, if you're going to be, they come with different speed ratings and different quality ratings, and if you're going to be doing the HD movies or something, you probably want to look for the better, the higher grade one. But for average snapshots, not a problem. The other thing is they come in all different sizes and shapes, not just SD cards, but you'll find a bunch of them. That's why these card readers that you can buy for 20 bucks to stick in your computer have, someone will read 15 different kinds of cards and an extra USB port to boot. So my big Nikon SLR has a big old memory thing that's it has a whole row of holes instead of the little brass contacts, and it's a lot different kind of memory than, well, it's the same kind of stuff electronically, but a lot different format, plugging it into a camera. The SD cards are fairly universal. A lot of the point and shoot cameras are using the SD cards, although there may be some brands that have their own oddball cards. Is it necessary if you have an Olympus brand camera to only buy an Olympus SD card instead of a Crucial SD card? Or no, not really. They should all work equally well. And the price of memory space in those cards has come down quite a lot. So you can get 16 gigs for maybe 30 bucks or so, maybe less than that now. Another question. Okay, so we went through the Windows Explorer. We almost have enough time to get to Wanda's question. By the way, if you go to the Computer Club homepage, click over to the little schoolhouse option, one of the options there you can click on is Computer Tips and Tricks and Tips. And if you go there, you can get my tutorial on how to use Windows Explorer. And there's two versions of it, one for XP and one for Windows 7. So if you're not really comfortable using Windows Explorer yet, you have the power to go to our website and learn a little bit more about it, if you're a text-oriented learner, that is. There's another tutorial there on how to use my favorite way to deal with the pictures once they're in the computer. And that's a program called PaintShop Pro. And Louis has a copy of PaintShop Pro here. In my particular computer, you know, back up a step. You remember when I had a list of all those pictures that Mr. Nikon made for me, and they were all JPG files, JPG image files? Well, in each computer, there is some program that's set up to be the default program to look at JPG files. Now, there are lots of possible programs that can open up and view JPG files, but in my computer, I set it up so that whenever I have a list of those things, like, oh, maybe I have something in XJunk. Oh yeah, there's a JPG file. If I double click on that, this computer, because PaintShop Pro is a default program to mess with JPG files, when I double click on a JPG file, it will open the picture in PaintShop Pro. And here's where I can do magic stuff. For example, there's a tool here. If I wanted to isolate this and just have this be my picture, I can capture that much, and I can say, yeah, I accept that. Now I've got a new picture from the old picture, a cropped picture. But I don't want to do that, so I'm going to say undo. The other thing is, I may notice here that this image, I don't think you can read the lower right corner of the display from back there, but I tell you it says image is 4,000 by 3,000 pixels. If I was going to email this to my cousin, I wouldn't email until I resized it. And this program allows me to do this. I can click on the resize tool, and I can go down here and I can say, okay, let's make that 600 by 450 instead of its original 4,000 by 3,000. Okay. And it resized it now. I can still zoom in on it, but there's a lot fewer pixels now. The file size is dramatically different. Let's see if we can save this in that junk drawer as a JPEG file. And use the same name. Nope, use a different name, because I'll have two competing names. Version B. Okay, now let me go to Windows Explorer and list the details here. And the difference is that the original one, the one that was 4,000 pixels, was 2,631 kilobytes in size. The one that I shrunk down is 107 kilobytes in size. Oh, that would email a lot faster and make my cousin a lot happier if I did that. Ask me another question.
With the newsletter, we then often put it into a JPEG, into a PDF file and can shrink it down also. Would that work with your 107?
Yeah, PDF files, the portable document files, usually are used for combinations of text and graphics rather than just plain graphics. But it's possible to create, but I don't know if PaintShop Pro does this. Let's see. I never wanted to create a PDF out of a single picture before. This is a list of all the file formats that PaintShop Pro can change it to. And PDF is not one of them, sorry.
So
now,
you could do it, you could take it to LibreOffice and then do it.
Yes, you could do that. Or if you were going to send it around the world by email, virtually everybody, JPEG is a universal graphics file format, and all web browsers can open JPEG files. The new and upcoming variation of that, which is also becoming universal, is something called a PNG file, a portable network graphics file. And that's usually a little bigger than a JPEG file, but it preserves more data than a JPEG file does. This is more than you have time to worry about right now, but JPEG files are compressed files, as opposed to some other formats which don't try to make the file smaller by analyzing all the dots. Actually, this is mathematics magic. When you save a JPEG file with a lower compression or a lower resolution, a lower quality size, there's formulas going on in the little computer's brain, and it scans across pixel by pixel all of the pixels in a whole image, and it goes along and says, ooh, there's one. Is it the same or different than the next one? Is it the same or different? And it keeps doing that. And if it's the same, it says, okay, I don't need to change anything here. And so it goes through there and it compresses it by only storing changes in what's in each pixel rather than saving every pixel separately. And as a result, you can get a smaller file, but when you blow them up, they tend to get a little grainy because of that. But that's above and beyond the scope of today's discussion. There's a question over here. Microphone, please.
Microphone is en route.
What did you click up there to get to the resizing?
Couldn't hear you on the microphone from here, sorry.
Okay. What did you click to resize? You know, when you
in
had
PaintShop Pro. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
in PaintShop Pro.
There's a little tool here that says resize. If you hover on the tools, the tooltip pops up.
Okay.
But if you don't have that tool there and you say image and go down here to someplace it'll say resize, Maybe it's under adjust, I forget, because I always have a tool right there.
Okay, thank you.
But it's findable if you're using Paint Shop Pro. By the way, some of the software that comes with some of the cameras have some image manipulation capability where you can do some basic cropping and you can do some basic resizing. And so if you don't have Paint Shop Pro, you may want to go ahead and install that software that came with your camera and see what you can do with that as far as cropping and resizing before you email it. I've even seen one of those programs that has an email the picture option when you have the picture loaded there, and you click on email it, and it resizes it before it sends the email. So that may be an argument for using something other than Paint Shop Pro because it already came with your camera. Again, thank you very much, and I'll hang around if you have leftover questions.